The palace gates had been quiet for years. Familiar. Predictable. Everyone thought they knew how the story of this royal family would unfold. But then everything changed. A single announcement shattered every expectation. And the wedding the world had whispered about for a decade is now confirmed. Not rumored. Not speculated. Real. And nothing about this love story is what anyone thought it was. Because the truth behind it is deeper, older, and far more emotional than the world ever imagined. For generations, the kingdom of Aravel had followed strict traditions. Duty first. Love second. Every royal match had been strategic and cold, crafted in private rooms with gold-trimmed walls and silent advisors. But this time, the story refused to fit inside tradition. This time the heir to the throne made a choice that stunned the world. The choice of a partner not selected by power, not by diplomacy, but by something that hadn't guided this royal house for over 2 centuries, genuine, breathtaking love. The whispers began long before the announcement. A captured glance at a charity gala. A shared umbrella during an unexpected storm. The kind of small, human moments that tabloids try to inflate, but the palace always denied. And yet those who paid attention knew. Something was blooming. Something fragile, precious, and untamed by royal expectation. A type of connection the royal house had long forgotten how to nurture. For years, the royal press office repeated the same firm statement: there is no engagement. There are no plans. Cold, controlled, measured. But behind those closed doors, behind the velvet curtains and guarded hallways, a story was unfolding that no one outside the palace could have imagined. It began long before cameras noticed anything. Long before the public speculated. It began on a quiet morning in the royal conservatory. The future monarch, crown heir Alistair of Aravel, had slipped away from meetings to breathe for a moment among the roses. The air was soft, pale with the early sun, and he believed himself alone, until he heard her. Her voice was steady yet soft, explaining the delicate care of the palace's oldest greenhouse to a group of volunteers. She wasn't a noble. She wasn't a socialite. She wasn't connected to any political house. She was simply someone who loved caring for living things. A historian turned botanical researcher. Her name was Elise Torren. And in that single moment, her laugh caught his attention the way no ceremony or royal ball ever had. He didn't speak that day. Not yet. But something inside him shifted, subtly, like a compass finding its true north. Over the next year, their meetings were accidental only at first. A charity event involving environmental restoration. A lecture hosted at the National Museum. A stormy afternoon in the capital when she stepped out of a crowded cafe at the same moment he was being ushered in by guards. The rain had drenched both of them, and as the cameras flashed from across the street, he had handed her his coat without hesitation. A gesture so simple, it was almost mundane. Yet in that frozen image captured by a bystander, the world saw a spark before they themselves truly understood it. Inside the palace, tension grew. Advisors whispered behind doors. The queen worried. The king remained silent, watching his heir carefully, balancing the weight of tradition with the shifting world around him. For centuries, the monarchy had built alliances through marriages. And now, their future king was falling for someone whose only power was her quiet intelligence and the softness with which she carried herself. But something remarkable was happening across the kingdom. People loved her, not because she was glamorous or extravagant, but because she was real. When asked to speak at a charity dinner, she didn't offer polished lines. She spoke of her father fixing old greenhouses behind their home and her mother teaching her that every living thing grows at its own pace. She spoke with sincerity that couldn't be manufactured. And while the palace remained silent, the public began to hope. Hope for a love story that didn't feel staged. Hope for a future queen or consort who understood ordinary life. Hope for a royal marriage that wasn't built in a boardroom but in the heart. But inside the palace, fear and love wrestled. Could the kingdom accept her? Could tradition bend without breaking? Could a monarchy built on centuries of arrangement survive a love story that defied expectation? The first turning point came quietly. During a national holiday celebration, Leonor was invited, privately, discreetly, to the viewing balcony. Not beside the crown heir, but tucked away behind his family, part of the event but not featured in it. Yet cameras still found her. And the warmth in the crown heir's eyes when he looked back at her sent shockwaves through the media. For the first time, the palace did not deny her presence. And that silence was louder than any statement. What the world didn't know was that earlier that morning, something profound had happened inside the palace walls. The crown heir had stood before his parents and told them that this was not a fleeting curiosity. That his heart had made its choice. That love was not a scandal. That the people, in their modern lives and open hearts, deserved a monarchy that reflected change, not resisted it. The king said nothing for a long time. He simply walked to the window, looking down at the crowds gathering for the festivities. People of all ages, all backgrounds, celebrating tradition but also living in a world far different from the one he inherited. And then, quietly, he gave his blessing. Not because it was politically wise, but because he saw the conviction in his son's eyes. A conviction that could shape the future of the kingdom more than any alliance. But a blessing behind closed doors did not mean the world would accept it easily. Critics emerged. Old families protested. Newspaper columns debated endlessly. Some feared the monarchy was abandoning its foundation. Others celebrated the fresh air sweeping into its halls. And in the midst of it all, Alistair and Elise continued to choose each other. Not in grand moments, but in the small ones that truly define a relationship. Late-night conversations in quiet palace corridors. Shared books left at each other's doors. Walks through the gardens where they first crossed paths. The building of a bond that cameras couldn't capture. Every curiosity loop that the public opened only led to deeper questions. Why her? What made their bond so strong? Would the royal family ever make it official? And with every appearance, every shared look, the world's fascination grew. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A photograph taken on a winter morning. Alistair, dressed plainly without royal insignia, walking hand in hand with Elise through the snowy palace park. No guards crowding them, no staged lighting, just two people in love, unaware the world was watching. Within hours the image was everywhere. Social networks exploded. News channels repeated it endlessly. And for the first time, the palace could not contain the story. 3 days later, the statement arrived. Short, simple, unavoidable. The crown heir of Aravel and Elise Torren are engaged. The world stopped. People cried. People cheered. Even skeptics softened. Because this time, the royal house wasn't presenting a polished, political match. It was presenting a love story. A real one. A human one. Wedding. Preparations began immediately, and the pressure was immense. The palace was determined to honor tradition while allowing the couple's authenticity to shine. Designers from across the world submitted sketches. Florists proposed arrangements inspired by the historic royal gardens. Musicians wrote original pieces blending classical symphony with modern emotion. And through it all, Leonor remained calm, grounded, and deeply connected to the meaning of every detail. She requested the ceremony's floral installations to include the same species of roses found in the conservatory where they first crossed paths. She asked that the choir include children from the foster program she had supported for years. She insisted that the ceremony's reading honor not royal lineage but the quiet persistence of love through adversity. The city transformed. Streets filled with flags. Balconies draped in soft ivory fabrics. Artisans worked day and night crafting decorations that honored history while embracing the future. Travelers poured into the capital to witness even a glimpse of the event. Hotels were booked for months. Cafes decorated their windows with sketches of the couple. And everywhere, anticipation grew. Finally, the morning arrived. A soft sunrise brushed gold across the palace towers as bells began to ring, deep, resonant, echoing across the city. Crowds gathered along the procession route hours before the ceremony. People held flowers, homemade signs, portraits, and handwritten blessings. Some had traveled thousands of miles. Some had watched the royal family for decades. All were united in the same breathless anticipation. Inside the palace, Leonor stood before a mirror, her gown shimmering like morning dew. Not extravagant, not overwhelming, but elegant, graceful, and woven with meaning. The embroidery traced delicate vines symbolizing growth. The neckline echoed the architectural curves of the palace's historic wings. And the veil, light, airy, almost dreamlike, was crafted from the restored lace rescued from the palace archives. Her mother wept softly as she adjusted the final pin. Her father stood in awe, unable to speak. Elise herself trembled only once, when she whispered that she wanted to be worthy, not of the crown, but of the man waiting for her. In another chamber, Alistair stood dressed in a ceremonial suit that blended tradition with modern tailoring. His hands shook slightly as he waited. But when his advisor asked if he was nervous, he only smiled. He had never been more certain of anything. The music began. The great doors opened. And in that single moment, the world witnessed a love story crystallize into destiny. Elise stepped forward, her presence radiant yet gentle, her eyes fixed on Alistair as if no one else existed. The crowd fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. As she reached him, he whispered something only she could hear. Whatever it was, her eyes filled with tears, soft and sincere. The ceremony unfolded with breathtaking beauty. The vows were intimate, spoken from the heart rather than from centuries-old scripts. The king's blessing was warm and emotional, his voice breaking as he welcomed Elise into the family. And when the couple finally sealed their promise with a kiss, the city erupted. Bells rang, crowds cheered, people embraced strangers, fireworks shimmered across the sky in daylight. This wasn't just a royal wedding. It was a turning point. A rewriting of tradition, a story of love choosing its own path and reshaping history with its courage. The celebration continued long into the night. Lanterns drifted over the river. Music filled the streets. In the palace, the couple shared their first dance beneath a canopy of lights designed to mimic the stars on the night they first truly connected. Their movements were gentle, unhurried, wrapped in a world of their own. Every guest watched in silence, sensing that they were witnessing a love that would define a generation. And as the night deepened, Elise and Alistair slipped away from the grand hall, finding themselves once more in the conservatory where their story began. Surrounded by the same roses, the same soft light, the same stillness that brought them together, they stood quietly for a moment, soaking in the weight of everything. The journey, the pressure, the expectations, the love. Alistair reached for her hand, the same way he had that snowy morning when the world first realized the truth. She leaned into him, breathing a quiet promise. Together, they stepped into their future, not as symbols forced by tradition, but as partners bound by choice and heart. And that is why this wedding became the one the world had been waiting for. Not because of the grandeur. Not because of the titles. But because it reminded everyone, across borders and generations, that love, true love, still has the power to reshape history. The world had waited. And the world was right to wait. Because when the doors opened and the bells rang and two hearts stepped forward as one, a new chapter began. Not just for a royal family. Not just for a kingdom. But for everyone who still believes that love can overcome tradition, expectation, and time itself. And this is only the beginning of their story.